Welcome to Musicians Peer Support, everybody. Today we are back with Jon Altham for our Artist's Blueprint series. This is week 2. Jon, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for allowing us to record the session for those who cannot make it. Let's dive right in.
Oh, let's do it. So, first things first, thank you for everyone being here, and equally those that are, I'm sure, going to watch this back. My thinking for today is chapter two is pretty short. It's basically about building on that foundation we did on chapter one, looking at how we're going from survival to structure. And I thought I'd kick it off by just doing a little bit of a recap on the first chapter in terms of what the key takeaways were. And then if anyone has any questions, answering them, and then diving straight into chapter two, if that works for everyone. Okay, cool. So let's see if I can share my screen. Hopefully that works. Wicked. We got thumbs up. Fantastic. Okay, great. Let's go straight with the recap. So, with chapter one, that was basically for those that weren't there, we were talking about the system behind the song, and effectively what that means is how is value really created, and how does it move through the industry. So we talked about quite a lot of things, but the real key thing that came about this was really trying to ground this out and getting some real clarity as to who you are, what your identity is within the industry. Are you a writer, producer, artist? What is it that you want to do, and where do you want to go with that? And a part of that foundation was also about building and understanding where are these revenue streams coming from, so you can better understand where this base is, and then how to build from there. Because the key takeaway was it's all well and good being successful, but ultimately, if your foundation has cracks in it, and equally it doesn't align with who you are as a creator and what you're there to do, then ultimately it will all fall apart. And there's a key trend of that throughout the book. The effective key takeaways of this were talent without structure leads to burnout, because effectively you're just going in this repetitive cycle nonstop. Exposure without ownership leads to dependency, because we're constantly going into these deals where it's like, okay, well, we'll do it for free, but it means we can get you to a million people. Well, ultimately, if as part of that deal, you lose a lot of ownership and equity in that process, then ultimately you're still dependent on them, no matter where are in the future, because those deals are more than likely going to be perpetual. And therefore, in 5 or 20 years down the line, when that deal or song is then synced into a film, that little free bit of exposure that gave away is probably, maybe worth anywhere from 20 to maybe 40% lost of equity and ownership. So, you know, it's a really, really big thing to be careful of. And then finally, the key takeaway was freedom without discipline leads to chaos. Super simple, but very, very important. Um, and is pretty self-explanatory there as well. But a real key part of this ownership is design, and the key thing to remember was every time you create something, you're producing equity, and every time you sign something, you're transferring it. Just to bear in mind from a contract perspective, and that's where we kind of ground that out. So before we go into the next chapter, which is from survival to structure, why instinct alone keeps artists trapped in a survival loop. Did anyone have any questions or chapter one or reflections from the last discussion we had? No?
Thank you for that. Yes, when you say
Okay.
exposure without ownership leads to dependency. And
Yes.
I really love what you're saying about, actually, we'll stop the share just momentarily. Um,
Let me do that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, that's, there's some things that we hear along the way. which are artists have to pay their dues.
Mm,
Um, Not, that if it's free, it's not free. Um, and basically, the whole kind of idea that um, unless you've reached a certain level, which is a moving target and elusive also, um, you don't have a right. This is kind of something like we talked about last week. You don't have a right to charge, and you're supposed to be doing things for you have to do that's the only way is to, you
mm,
have to be able to do some things for free here and there. And from what I gather, your book isn't about absolutes. Um, so can you just speak to that second part, which is really so valuable? And you're saying, when it comes, the reason why you develop this is because when it gets down to it, 10 years down the line with a contract, you'll see it in numbers. Um,
yeah.
but for people who are just getting started, maybe just the first couple placements or just researching about the whole thing, there is this kind of idea like, well, who am I? Like, I don't have anything to show for whatever. Or even if it is, maybe you're on another part of the spectrum in terms of experience, but just that
Mm.
feeling of like, I have to do stuff for free sometimes.
Sure. And yeah, I think that is true in cases, and unfortunately, it's the perception that that is it's the only way to break it sometimes. But I think when you finally say no to it, and you then start putting a value on who you are and what you won't will and won't accept, people almost then take a double take. They're like, oh, hang on a minute. I usually say no, that gig in the pub is for free. Well, no, I'm not going to do it for free. And by not free, it doesn't necessarily have to be monetarily. It could be something else. It could be like, you two are working on, instead of it just being one thing, it's multiple gigs. And then aside from that, you're getting a share of revenue elsewhere of what's generated on the night. Or it could be that you're allowed to sell your own merchandise at the same time. Like there could be other ways that you could strategically get around that. If we're thinking outside of the pub, for example, and into a deal where it's like, um, no, let's just take a think placement, for example, or even worse, maybe a publishing deal that is excessive and aggressive initially. The point of exposure without ownership leads to dependency remains all throughout that. I guess the question is, are you okay with being dependent on that one-off? And equally, my question to that would be for how long, so that at least there's a bit of a reversion within that period. So, for example, like, um, all right, yes, okay, you can't afford to pay it, but we can get you in front of, 5 million reach or whatever that number may be. I might allow that, but with that, you're not getting a massive slice of equity within my business or my asset. Or if you are, I would like that reverted after a certain period of time, because naturally, with any the point being is any type of exposure, it doesn't stay forever. It's just a staircase that goes down over time. And so ultimately, I would argue with that any rights that are granted or license that are granted within that period should also have a step down in terms of their ownership stake. Um, so yeah, it is difficult. I think early in your career where you have to do things for free, whether that be a session musician gig or whatever wherever that may be. But there may be periods within that, even as a session musician, where you're like, um, okay, I appreciate that you can't pay me for my session fee, but maybe I can have points on the back end of the record or something like that. So at least you're then having or calling equity back somewhere. Um, I think the biggest challenge that you have, though, and we saw this a lot in the film sector with film composers starting out, was that if you ultimately said no to something like that, someone else would say yes to the free job. And then, oh, well, I've then lost out on a credit, and where does that leave me later down the line? The irony of it is, though, um, it actually devalues their career very, very significantly. And I found that from then booking a composer or producer or whoever, um, we're all in all of these groups and what have you. There's various ones on Facebook and the likes, but you're very aware of who knows who's aware of their value and who isn't. And to some extent, unfortunately, because all value is is a perception of what you're worth. It is all perceived. It's all made up. And people can make themselves look more valuable than others. It's purely perception and somewhat really an illusion. Um, but the point being is with that, unfortunately, there was then in the music supervisor's head or elsewhere that actually then there's a difference in quality. Whether that be right or wrong, those that were doing it for free, it was considered that they may not then have the resources. They may not be able to do it at the speed that's required. And ultimately, if you're working to a specific standard and you want something delivered to a high standard and you want it done on time and you want to hire people to support that professional, because no one should really expect you to do it all on your own if, for example, you're composing or you're producing a record or what have you, then ultimately that needs to be fully resourced. Um, so yeah, all I would say is it is hard. Um, there may be periods where you will be able to negotiate something else, but the point being is try not to, where possible, lose equity or specific ownership in the art that you're creating on the provision of exposure. That's the big takeaway. Because when you do, that's when you're really losing out. And my caveat to it would be if you really had to have a step down reversion, very quickly, I would say, with how technology is moving now and viral trends, you'd want it even less than 3 years, realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And it sounds like value is very much tied into it. One's
Mm.
own perception of their own value, and those around us. Can you speak to that? Like, how do we decide how to value what we do?
It's a good question. I think ultimately, I think there's a difference between price and value, right? And I think the first thing is, um, you price whatever is required for the project or what you have done to date on that. Um, Probably you'll want to have a profit margin in there, so you can determine what that profit margin is within that. But you can have a look online in terms of, let's call it professional services, in terms of profit margins. That will give you a rough example. So take your base costs, add the profit margin on top, and then maybe add like another 10 or 20% on top for, let's call it, administrative fees or whatever you decide to do. There's a good price point to start, which I think is more than reasonable. Um, and then you're not just scraping to go by, because I think a lot of the time, unfortunately, what happens is we price ourselves and then we realize we've priced ourselves to do the thing that we love, but not enough to live on it afterwards. And it's such a shame because, we've finally got the project, we love it, and then we're like, but I've spent all my money. I'm now going to go back in the cycle again. And unfortunately, that is a loop that is really, really difficult. And we actually touch on that in um, chapters to come in terms of this constant loop that we're in. And it's horrible. Um, and yeah, it's brutal. In fact, we're going to be talking about that today. So I hope that somewhat answers the question.
Yes. Yeah, that definitely leads us into what we're going to be in talking about today, but also hopefully sparks those of you in the room spark some ideas, and those of you watching the replay as well. Yes, Chrissy.
I just wanted to comment on that. I really love that you said freedom without discipline. I don't know the exact wording,
Leads
but
to chaos. Yeah.
leads to chaos.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Because that's something I really, I think is so important. And I grapple with it, like how to organize myself with my projects,
Mm,
um, endless creative ideas, so many song ideas and just like breaking it down and like saying like what am I going to work on this week, and am I going to work on it on my own or with someone, and like really making a list, because realizing that like 100 good ideas may, nothing could get done, as opposed to, deciding that it's like that decision you have to make. Like, no, this is where I'm going to put my attention this week or
Mm.
today or whatever it is. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that I like that you brought that up. I think it's really
Thank you.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and it's brutal as well because we've all been there. And as artists, unfortunately, um, we get stuck in this loop of like create, create, create. But like, how many unfinished projects have we actually got? I know I've got tons, right? Tons. And part of going through this and where this all came from as well was getting that to that point where it's like, okay, now I've really got to be structured. I've got to be a lot more disciplined. Does that actually mean that because we're disciplined and we're more structured, that we're less free? Actually, it's the completely opposite. It allows you to have more freedom as a result, because it creates the box in which you can create in, and keeps that nice and confined. I think a lot of the times, or at least my interpretation of that when I was doing this was, I hated being in that box because I felt like I was trapped and I couldn't be free. And actually, it is the complete opposite. Sometimes you need those little boundaries to be like, no, this is my time that I've put aside. Let's do it, and kind of get it done, and so then it works.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chrissy. Wonderful. Any other thoughts or anything to wrap up chapter one before we head into chapter two?
I would
Uh,
just add,
Go ahead.
if that's all right, on your point about price versus value, because we only just talked about price there in terms of, adding the profit margin in and the additional bits on top. That gives you your kind of your baseline price. I think then value on top of that is perceived in different ways, and unfortunately to different audiences as well. I'll give an example. So, um, you release an independent track on your website. You can price that how you wish, and ultimately, the audience will derive whether they feel that that is value added to them or not. Hence, that they will either buy the album or the record, or or they won't, or they'll wait for that to go on streaming, perhaps because they don't believe it's worth, you know. 19.99 or whatever price you put on there, and instead they would rather stream it for free. And that's the kind of issue where, streaming versus, vinyl, for example, in terms of where the value really comes from, there, and where people are wanting to buy. The other thing to that, and we can use the same record that might be coming into your minds or track that you've created, is if you were to take that to a film, and we talked about sync before. But let's say, for example, your track has been found online on Spotify or YouTube, and the director has got what's called temp love, and we talked about that before on previous kind of things, where temp love is this. I'm going to call it this obsession. It kind of is, to be honest. When you're in there, it feels like an obsession with directors and producers, where usually a track has been written into a script, or the final cut of a film, and they're using that as basically a temporary track in order to put their footage around. The problem is, or at least the problem to music supervisors, is that they've listened to that or the score so many times that they can't see the scene any other way but with that track. Um, and therefore, when we then get a brief to say, we want the score to sound a certain way, but they've used like a Hans Zimmer interstellar track or whatever that is, like, great, thanks for putting us on the spot. And it makes it very, very challenging. The point being, if that had been your track, for example, that just so happened to be, put as the temp track, your value has gone up like maybe tenfold compared to where you might have priced. And so, really, the perception aspect is where value comes in, and it means different things to different people. And I think the best way to determine your value ultimately is to have open and honest communication with whoever that end user is, whether that be your audience by building that community. If you build that community, they get to know you, the art that you create. Maybe there's a sub story behind it that increases the value and increases the likelihood that they might be more inclined to buy, right? And with a music supervisor, or you're syncing into a film, it's asking questions. It's like, okay, what is your budget? What are you going to be using it for? What's the scene? Are there any other tracks that you may be, looking at? Who are the other artists that you're syncing into the film, or am I the only one? Because if you're the only one and it's a main title track, whack a zero on the end of it. Like the point being is the value really, really starts to increase as a result of that, and you actually might have priced yourself a little bit lower. So I think the best way to determine value to loop around is to have honest and clear and transparent communication with whoever that end person is.
Yeah,
Hopefully that helps.
I mean, wow. When it comes down to communication, that's great because you said a lot of really cool things. And, temp love, that term gets
Yeah.
a little bit of a bad rap, but you're shining a different light in a more positive way of if you're the one that's getting the temp love, it might not be a bad thing. Because a lot of times temp love
Mm,
is like a bad thing. You're thinking it's a bad thing because they have temp love and you're trying to get, but what if you're the one that they're loving temporarily? So
yeah.
it could go either way. And it's just another example of for me of like a lot of these kind of things that we're taught in the sync world that are good, bad, this, that, black, white, that it just isn't like that. And that's why I like the way that you're presenting things. It's more principle based. You're talking
Mm.
about concepts and ideas and principles. And because it does have to be case to case, and it's not across the board one thing. So that's really great. Thank you so much for that. Communication being the bottom line on the end of that part of the
Yeah,
question.
I mean, temp love's a funny one. I mean, it's great for artists and the likes who have, had their stuff in it for a music supervisor who's on the film or the composer who's writing the score. It can be a bit of a nightmare when you've gone through, three or four versions, which are very in keeping with what the brief is, and it's like, but it's just still not hitting the same as Interstellar. And I'm like, I know, I know. you know but like but I find it personally very helpful because it gives you again that box and structure of like, this is what we're really looking for, and the way that you kind of get around that as a composer or as a music supervisor within those teams is, again, it's that communication point. It's okay, what are you really, really feeling? Like, tell me, because this is the thing, is like, particularly when I know I'm leaning on sync here, but they're different languages in terms of what film versus like, a musician speaks. They're completely different languages. So let's get it right back to the emotion. Like, what is it you feel at this moment in this scene? And as a result, you can then start to unpick it, and then you can write to that emotion, and that's when you get it across the line.
Yes, and that's what you talked about last week about emotion to architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much, John. Any other questions from the room? Also, those of you watching the replay, please feel free to, well, you can email me questions, but John is also on Twitter. So please find out, or X, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now. So you can ask questions there, right, John? If you're on that platform.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
feel free to ask over there. But also remember that we are doing this every Sunday until the end of January. So if you can't make it to one of them, come to the next one and come bring your questions. So questions definitely encouraged. And as we get into the next chapter here, all of you in the room, yeah, please feel free to ask questions. You can type them in the chat or raise your hand. And I'll field those questions. We'll kind of let John do the thing, and then we'll circle back and address all the questions. Does that sound good, John?
That was good to me. Yeah.
Okay, let's dig in.
Just a note on the Twitter thing. I'm completely new to it again. I've been off social media for a long time, so bear with me whilst I get to the grips of all of that. So yeah,
Everybody will be very patient. Don't worry.
yeah, starting afresh. Okay, so okay, instinct alone keeps artists trapped in the survival loop. Every artist reaches a moment where survival is no longer enough. It might come quietly during another unpaid project or suddenly when a deal falls apart and you realize how fragile everything really is. This is the point where passion meets exhaustion. You start to ask questions, may feel uncomfortable, but necessary. Why am I working this hard and still not moving forward? Why does everyone seem to know something I don't? These moments are not failures, signals. They tell you that instinct and effort alone cannot carry the weight forever. They mark the transition from emotion to architecture, from reacting to designing. Structure begins when you decide to stop running and start building. The survival cycle, which is something that we just talked about. Most creative people live inside what I call the survival cycle. It looks different for everyone, but the pattern is pretty much the same most of the time. Create, release, hope, react, and repeat. What do I mean by that? Well, create, you make something meaningful or something that you believe in. Release, you put it into the world and you wait. You then hope, you look for validation, opportunity, or that break. And then you react, you chase to whatever attention or offer arrives next. And then you repeat, you start again, but still hopeful. There's nothing wrong with the cycle itself. The problem is that without structure, it becomes endless. Every round takes more energy and yields less control. You start measuring success in moments instead of systems. The survival cycle feeds urgency. Structure feeds peace. When you build systems, you move from survival to sustainability. You start creating from intention rather than reaction. You start hoping for stability, stop hoping for stability, and start designing it. Why structure matters? Structure is not restriction; it is protection. It gives you your creativity a home to grow in. It turns chaos into rhythm. This often resist structure because they confuse it with limitation. But structure is simply a way of organizing what matters so you can make better choices, a container for freedom. Without structure, every new project feels like it's starting from zero. With it, every project builds on what came before. Structure is what allows you to say no without fear, to choose client and collaborators wisely, to know what to price, what to keep, and what to walk away from. It is what transforms, I hope this works, into I know what happens next. Building the foundation. Every creative system begins with three key questions. What am I building? What do I own? And what supports me? With what you're building, not the surface goal, but the deeper intention. Are you building a career, blog, a company, or a legacy? Each choice requires a different foundation. What do I own? Ownership is not just paperwork, it's awareness. Know where your rights are, where your data sits, and who controls the money that flows from your work. And then what supports you? This includes both the people and the processes, the right lawyer, right accountant, the right routine. You don't need a large team, you just need a consistent one. Once you answer these questions honestly, the path becomes clearer. System is anything that runs without your constant attention. It could be a release plan, a contract track, simple budgeting sheet, or a habit of reviewing your catalog every quarter. The goal is to remove uncertainty wherever you can. The more your systems carry, the more your mind is free to create. Freedom in art is not a lack of rules, it is clarity of responsibility. When your systems handle the routine, you can focus on the exceptional. Creative instability is often emotional, not financial. It comes from uncertainty, the sense that everything could collapse any moment. Structure changes that. It gives your nervous system permission to rest. When you know what is happening and what is protected, you can think clearly. You create with calm instead of panic. This stability does not make you complacent, makes you consistent. Consistency is what compounds into mastery. You think about the 10,000 hours that they mention and throw out all the time. It's the same concept. Most of the pain in creative careers comes from rushing. Industry rewards speed, rewards depth. Moving from survival to structure, patience. Systems take time to build and even longer to refine. Once they exist, They serve you endlessly. When you are patient, you start to recognize patterns others miss. You stop measuring your worth by comparison, in progress and design. Patience is not waiting, it is working steadily towards what you want without forcing it. Blueprint mindset. Building structure is not just about what you do, how you think. The blueprint mindset is made up of four principles: over complexity, over perfection, progress over performance, and alignment over ambition. The first, clarity over complexity. Simplicity scales, confusion. Process over perfection. Systems evolve through use, theory. Progress over performance. Sustainable careers are built by consistency, not applause. And finally, alignment over ambition. Choose what fits your values, not just looks impressive. These principles will reappear throughout the book, foundation of every framework that follows. Key takeaways are that you cannot control how the world receives your work, but you can control how you build it. You cannot stop uncertainty. You can reduce its power through structure. You cannot eliminate chaos, but you can organize it into rhythm. Structure is the bridge between creativity and freedom. It does not silence your art, it sustains it. When you move from survival to structure, you stop hoping for a career, you start building one. Then at the end, just quickly, is a little loop that I'll put on the screen, which I think kind of really helps summarize this really, really nicely. So on the inside, we have the survival cycle, and on the outside, we have the structure cycle. And the difference between chaos and rhythm is the key takeaway. So starting on the right-hand side, you have create, release, hope, react, and repeat. In an ideal world, when you move that to structure, what you have is you design first, you build, you measure, you refine, and then you scale. And that can completely. There's a massive, massive difference. And so I'll leave that there and answer any questions or thoughts that may come up. Equally, if you want me to go back to any parts of it and dive into it in further detail and give you specific case studies, I'm more than happy to do so as well. I know it's super short and sweet, but hopefully it grabs the points.
Thank you so much, John. Do you mind going back to um, just up a little bit where you start talking about progress over performance, alignment over ambition? Yeah, I just missed the
Yes.
first two, clarity over complexity and process over perfection. Um,
Yes.
this I really love here, your blueprint mindset, John, because Musicians Peer Support has a Patreon community and we work with artists on a weekly basis. So you start to see how different philosophies, um, get your career going over time
Mm.
when you're putting something into practice every week. And this really makes sense to me. Um, clarity over complexity, simplicity scales, confusion costs. This one thing is a big thing, which we'll
Mm.
probably talk about. Process over perfection, systems evolve through use, not theory. This is great. Again, a very long one that's super involved, that has so many details that we would talk about as an artist. But
Yeah.
the two that really just resonated in terms of broad, big picture, hits my heart emotions were the last two, which is progress over performance. Sustainable careers are built by consistency, not applause. And that first one of not really asking or seeking recognition or credibility, but that you have done that. I saw this one quote about something like, "It's not what you get, but who you become." Um,
Yeah.
and I really
Yeah.
love that. Alignment over ambition. This is my favorite out of all of them. Choose what
Yeah.
fits your values, not just what looks impressive. Because what I like to talk about is chasing the carrot. And thank you so much. You can stop your share if you'd like, John. But this culture of like trying to get, and that it's, I mean, it's not bad to have ambition. Um, but there's some, it can sometimes take over and we lose that alignment. So I
Yeah.
really, really like that because on a regular basis, I see this happening a lot. And just that one as a compass can affect all the other ones. It's almost like you can't do all the other ones if you're purely driven by ambition and not alignment.
Yeah, and really, um, I mean, each of those 4 points are there's massively deep layers within all of them. And it's kind of written in that way that it's succinct, but then allows you to then deep dive wherever it really takes you. And each time different parts of your career as well, it will hit differently as well. But particularly for this ambition thing, for me at least, it speaks to ego, and that's really where it comes in. So, yeah, do you take that? You know, there's a really good book actually. I think it's by Ryan Holiday. Ego is the enemy. I highly recommend it. It's very, 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 very good. But it kind of also talks to the point that, like, as the title says, unfortunately, it can go against you. And yes, you can have ambition where it's kind of positive. It gives you that propulsion. It pushes you forward, and motivates you. But sometimes it can go the other way, where actually it's the biggest distraction ever, and you take that shiny object, um, and that really really exciting deal. I there was an I'll use an example as well. That there's something you know. Also, I'll use this instead. You say, for example, you release something, and you're doing a cover. I'll just use a cover for Stranger Things, right? Because that's the big show that's going on at the moment, and you ride that viral wave. Okay, that's that reaction aspect of the career. Fine. But what ends up happening is, say, for example, you end up really hitting the traction nicely, that really nice curve coming out of that, because it's what everyone's talking about. You just plug it every single week and even into the new year when it re-releases. Um, Great. Now everyone starts talking about it and you get all this noise and this chatter, and it's like, okay, now I want to book you for an interview. I want you on such and such show or whatever. And it's like, great. Ultimately, what got you there to begin with was the fact that you were aligned and you knew what you were doing in your career, and it's the structure and the decision that got you there. It wasn't the noise that is now created after the fact, because the reality is the noise is chasing that short-term cycle anyway. It's just its own echo chamber. Um, so, where that ego comes in, it's like, oh, I like this really, shiny object. Maybe I should grab that, when ultimately you do it, you exhaust it. Going back to the thing before, where you've got the create, release, hope, react, and that repeats. You're absolutely tired and exhausted by the end of it. You love the ride, but then you're like, oh, now that's over and it's all quiet down and there is no noise. I'm back to where I was, but I'm more exhausted than I've ever been before, and I'm no longer aligned to my center. What do I even do? And that pickup phase is massive. It's so hard. Um, so at those periods, sometimes it is actually a case of saying thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad you want to talk about it. That's good, but it can't take up time from what I'm doing, because I'm already on the next project. I'm doing what
Because
is
it's not
what is right.
aligned. And
Yeah, and
and ultimately,
ultimately they'll talk about it anyway.
right.
If it's that good and it serves their news cycle, right, and it's that viral, it benefits them to post it. So they'll continue to keep talking about it. Um, and maybe what you can do is say, look, what I will do is I'll sublicense it to you or whatever, so you can keep going on that narrative. But meanwhile, I'm not going to let it drain up too much of my energy, and I'm going to continue focusing on what I'm doing. It's like I kind of was touching on last week. if you ignore all the negative comments that are put online, which will inevitably happen, you really should, in my view, also ignore all the positive ones. But you can't really pick and select because otherwise you're only speaking to your own echo chamber and what you want to hear anyway, which doesn't really serve anything. You're better off just putting it completely aside and just staying back in your zone and continuing to do what's already proving to be very successful. Um, and that's where I kind of it grounds me with that.
Yeah, that's good. Grounded in alignment.
Yeah,
And and then John, if you don't mind showing us the cycle again, because
yeah, of course.
if you're coming from that place, that outer circle is almost like it's just exponential because you have the refine and scale part. And I learned about scaling a little bit through, just the last few years and talking with people like you and saying like this is what you got to do. Got to structure and you got to, and then ultimately you're going to scale. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
We're gonna what now? And so
Yeah,
can you just talk
yeah,
about how the inner circle that we're talking about, create, release, hope, react, repeat, this is just very like in a loop. It's almost just like a linear, like A to B, keep going. It's a repeat thing. Whereas the outer circle is cyclical in a way that it is like it's kind of like, it's not like the earth, it's not like the sun, the earth is just going around the sun and then we're just spinning in circles, but the sun is moving also, so there's a trajectory there that's like this circle doesn't stop, because you have that refine and scale part and you're building, that outer circle keeps going and growing, whereas that
yes.
middle one does not grow. Am I
Yeah,
right in that?
yeah. I basically is also like the reason why I've put it as red is that it's, if it's to kind of I've been thinking about this quite deeply as been going through it in terms of all the colors on this as well. But when you're looking at, even your balance sheet or whatever that may be, all your statements, you see, what's going positive, what's in the black, and what's in the negative, what's in the red, right? And effectively, the red here in the survival is what's taking the energy away from you. It's more negative, whereas the outer circle is that positive energy. It really fuels you. It makes you more efficient. And more importantly, with that structure, because it's more efficient, it allows you to spend more time and energy on what you want to create rather than reacting constantly and being tired as a result of it, which is a massive drainer. So yeah, think of it as positives and negatives effectively. And it's worth pointing out on this that quite a lot of the time, this is what actually tends to happen. People create, release, hope, react and repeat, go around that cycle and they think, oh great, I'm doing well, I'm in this viral moment. Now I need to scale. But how can you scale something that doesn't have a stable system and foundation? It's actually impossible. Um, and worth noting, and this is, bit of a sneak peek in the many things of the books that are going to come in the future, but and equally what we talk about later on in this book. But long-term goal, if you're ever wanting to sell a catalog, I would say it more generally in any business. If I was to sell like my company to someone else, ultimately it has to be able to run without me being the person who's the key person of influencing and controlling that business. Otherwise, it's only as valuable as I am alive. It's just that simple. And the reality is what you're building is an asset. And that asset has value, and you have to be able to make that value predictable and reliable and hopefully somewhat scalable in the future, but definitely reliable and predictable because that allows you to determine and put a price value on that for then the future projections if you were to sell your catalog later down the line. Um, but ultimately, if your um, dreams, for example, or your sales solely derived on the fact that you were the face of it because you were the person pushing it on social media all the time and not like more of a community story, the value actually drops because when you're out the picture and you're not pushing that catalog anymore, you're not doing your tours. Is it really going to be worth 20x? Probably not, probably maybe 5 or 10. And there's a massive difference in between the two. So it's not just about making your own career better. It's actually thinking about in terms of asset value. Does it actually increases the asset value because it's more reliable and more predictable? Now, as an aside, does that mean you have to sell your catalog? No. But as an independent artist, what you might want to do is instead of having to go to the labels to get your advance, you might want to get an advance yourself. And if you can prove to whoever financer that is, that could be an independent financer or investor, seed investor, that, I need, 50 to 100 grand to my next album or whatever that may be, whatever the number is, but I can show you reliably this is the revenue that's coming through. You no longer have to sign deals you didn't want to sign because you've got the structure in place and you can show predictable and reliable revenue. And that's really where it comes from
Thank you, John.
as a
And
business play too.
I mean, and it's really great because, and this is what I love about musicians peer support is, um, this can be applied to all levels.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's amazing about that. Um, I'm thinking of studio owners, production houses that are scaling their businesses, etc.
Mm,
Making use of this book. But as you know, here at Musicians Peer Support, we also work with many, many hobbyists that are hoping to turn professional. Maybe not have not made their first dollars yet with music, or maybe just absolutely getting their start in terms of building a business. This is something that's like way, 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 way down the line for people. So I just want to address that, um, and assure them that this is like, really coming from like a foundational standpoint, right, John? Like, you don't have to have ambition to create a 500 song catalog and then sell it, um to be into this. I mean, what I hear here is legacy. I'm looking at this like, wow, this really is a great blueprint for moving forward, in terms of building a legacy in my own personal
mm.
experience. But if somebody just kind of wants to like do some sync stuff and like get some songs into some shows and make some money and build like a decent business, maybe start earning a living. Yeah, like you said, maybe make enough to like actually quit that day job and make a living with music. This stuff can be applied to that too, right? You don't have to be like totally serious all in, to apply these principles and have it benefit you, right?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it can apply to pretty much anything. And I would say, say for example, you wanted to learn the guitar, right? A similar kind of thing. You're kind of creating, you're playing around, and then you're trying to learn your scales because that's what the teacher asks you to do. Your release version is that you are doing that in front of them, right? You're finding the lesson, you're playing, you're hoping that the practice that you put in place was sufficient enough. That's your hoping, and then you're reacting to what they're saying, and then you repeat the entire cycle again, and you go to the next lesson, and you're basically doing the same learning loop. Um, and that could be if you're learning the guitar for the first time, it doesn't matter what grade you're doing, whatever. Going on to the outside loop is to design is okay, maybe to if I want to, do my grade one or I want to progress to here, I need to design a system that works well for me. What does that mean? I need to set some time aside. How much time is that? Is it an hour? Can I afford maybe an hour a week rather than not doing it at all? Can I do more than that? Can I do half an hour a day? Whatever it is, it's designing those kind of, let's call it that box again. What is that kind of key thing that we're going to put ourselves in? And then build within that. So that building time is the practice. I've set that time away. I'm practicing, I'm practicing, I'm practicing, and then you're within the lesson. It's more valuable as a result of it because you put the time and effort and you've got that system in place. How are you going to measure that? Well, now that lesson becomes more valuable. You get the feedback. What worked? What didn't work? What did you struggle with? Is an hour a week enough? or do I need to do more? Is it really what I want to do? Is it aligned with me? No. Okay. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to go and try something completely different. But the point is, you get that feedback loop. And then finally, you refine and you scale it. You know what works, you know what doesn't work. And then you scale as a result of that. So you're either scaling because if it doesn't align with you, you're scaling yourself because you know what does and doesn't serve you. Or it does serve you. You've got that foundation of it's, an hour a day or whatever that may be, scale it. Cool. We've got a system that works. We're going to do more repetitions and we're going to do our grades. Wicked. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think it covers across all areas. Really.
beautiful. And so this is designing a system, designing a scalable system um, that can work for multiple things.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people think like systems is like data and software, right? It is quite a technical term, but ultimately it isn't. It's anything that kind of serves you. It's some kind of structure. Um, I would say within this, I think a really, really good one, and we touched on it last week as well, is how many times you're actually reflecting on where you're actually at and where you want to go. I think it's a really, really important practice as yourself as a professional or just generally in you could say just in life are you reflecting yourself like what have you achieved so far. Where do you want to go, and what are you and what aren't you happy with, and it kind of brings you back to that center again. So I think even in its most simplest design, being structure around reflection equally then helps you develop yourself too.
Wonderful. Okay. So just wondering if anybody in the room has some questions. Any thoughts, questions, something that might apply to your own life? Do you feel conflicted about something? Do you not agree with
Ooh.
something? Um, how does it feel to you? Yes, Chrissy.
So yeah, on the point of kind of stepping back and asking yourself where you're at and,
Mm.
what you've achieved so far, how often do you think it's good to do that? Or do you think that like those questions arrive somewhat intuitively and then you address it like through I think like sometimes discomfort, like you'll feel like things are not aligned like you were saying,
Yes.
and you start to ask yourself, well, wait, why, like questions come up. And so obviously that's a really good time to stop and reflect and ask yourself what's happening. But do you recommend any like every 2 months, or is it just so specific?
Or every time you get an email with something, or I mean, is it a daily thing, task based or
Yeah, it's a really really good question. I'll ask you I'll answer it in a few different ways. Firstly, when I first realized that I had to reflect was when I was in my worst period. So I hadn't been doing it. And all of this book comes from all of the the learnings along the way. But effectively from a multitude of things that I took on at once. It all came to a point, and then I was like, "Oh, actually, I can't. This isn't aligned with who I am." I was like so far deep in it that I just kind of I went with the flow effectively, um, and then realized like I'm just drained. Like I've got no energy left. What is this doing to me? I'm juggling time zones and everything. It just doesn't serve me anymore. And at that point, it was hard actually, really, really hard. But that was my core reflection point, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I stripped everything away and just rebuilt again. Um, and that was my first kind of point. And I would say that's kind of really deep in the survival cycle where you cannot physically take it anymore. I think that's where the first kind of reflection point comes up. And I don't, to be honest with you, people can tell you and say many times like you need to take a break, you need to reflect, blah blah blah. But that doesn't really help. I think you can only help yourself when you're ready and willing to do that. And I think that's true for a lot of things, to be fair, from at least from my experience. Um, and it was just at that point when I was like, right, I'm ready. Like I have no other choice at this point. I'm ready uh to seriously reflect on where I want my career to go. How's that going to impact, friends and relationships, my social life, and all of this, of family, eventually and stuff, and what have you. So there were a couple of key milestones effectively that were coming up, and I was like, this isn't sustainable. What do I do next? So that was a key turning point for me. And then in terms of more regularly, I would say I reflect at least quarterly on a business perspective in terms of, um, so there is a thing on, there is another diagram here, which uh, later in the book, which is specifically four quadrants. It's on the website as well, but Q1, Q2, 3, and 4. And it specifically asks you not to necessarily reflect on yourself, but of the business. So it might be at Q1, we're doing an audit, we're looking at royalty statements and whatever, and then you don't think of it for the rest of the year, and you do the rest of the audit in the other quarters. The reason being is personally for me, I found that the best way because it became very, very overwhelming to do it all at once. It was just a lot. And in the first quarter, doing all of that and then having to do all your annual end of year accounts and everything else as well, I was like, it's the last. I can't do it all. So for me, splitting it into chunks and having three specific focuses each quarter really, really helped me to reflect on those parts of my business.
And you share that in the book?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it's on the website as well. Actually,
Okay,
there's a
wonderful.
diagram. In fact, I'll find the diagram, so I can reference it, um, and then it will be easier to explain. So I'll loop back into it, and then the other parts of reflection really come in where I just do. It's kind of been practice for me, where I used to do it each week because I was going through a burnout stage effectively, and when you're burnt out, the best way to really get out of that is I use just a traffic light system. It sounds ridiculous, but like, red is your hard stop, green is I'm good to go, and then amber days, I'm like, right, I'm nearing that I'm tired. I need to just maybe just stop for a bit and then wait till I'm back in green and then I'll crack on and go again. And that
Mm-hmm.
was just a really easy visual for me. And I was just like, okay, at the end of the day, where am I feeling? On that scale. Okay, I'm Amber. Okay, maybe I'll go to bed earlier tonight and get up earlier. Back on my green again, I just crack on, and then it's what I realized from there. I stopped getting back in. I stopped going into the red. I stopped going into the amber, and I stayed in the green. And then I can kind of continue from where I was, and that was then really where I was like, oh, the world is very quiet again. It's really, really nice and peaceful. It's so good. And mentioned there, it's nice. And therefore, then going back to the final bit is really alignment on, and the reflection from that point is if I get an email, an opportunity, or whatever comes through, I specifically kind of look at that and it's like, does that really add value or does it not? Or does it take energy from me or does it take it away? Or does it add energy? And if it doesn't align with me, it's just simply no, because I know that will just get me into, that red again.
And
And
this does this and the same in terms of like, the whole class that you did about what to ask for. You touched on it earlier. Um,
mm,
Things to consider if you're not getting paid this way, you're getting paid that way. I mean, it's a case to case kind of a thing, right? Like, okay, kind of
yeah,
having to think about your value. I mean, I don't know, just in my own personal experience, like I kind of have to think about my value throughout the day, uh,
yeah,
like in several points for various reasons, I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, like if there's some kind of offer or a gig comes up, if I'm invoicing somebody, I guess like if there is money happening, I can't help but think about, how much worth it was and, just value in and of itself, and then like what I'm doing, what I did to earn it.
Mm.
So I don't know if that's normal. Maybe I should talk to my therapist about that. But I think that following this type of system and this type of mindset is really healthy because it does give like discipline. You said structure is protection.
Yeah.
And you said turning chaos into rhythm. And
Yeah,
that consistency is what compounds mastery.
absolutely. And I think you know, well, not to go into the the business and the finances too much, but ultimately, what's also really, really helpful is having an emergency fund, or having a source of income that you can rely on that isn't necessarily something that is as volatile as what you're going for. Because ultimately, um, if you're going to do something that's truly aligned to you, know that it's going to be periods where it's incredibly quiet for a long period of time before it arcs up. It's just natural. And But as I kind of outlined in that, it's at least staying true to what your values and everything is. Don't go for that shiny object because it's impressive. I'll equate this to, I'll use Twitter X, right? I haven't been on social media in ages. I'm starting it fresh. I don't, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to start again and go from there. If anyone sees it, cool. If they don't, doesn't matter. It's just a body of work that I'm putting out there because it aligns with me and helps me with my processing of the frameworks and what I'm trying to work through. And I know that, like, and in comparison, someone might say, you know what, I'm going to buy retweets, followers, whatever it is, because the numbers, if I've got followers, it means that it's super impressive. And it's just about what you're actually willing to chase. And that's what I would kind of go back to there. But having that emergency fund, I think, is particularly helpful, or a source of income that allows you to say no to the things that don't align with you, will add more value over time. And I've seen that and experienced.
And thank you for that, John. And you mentioned last week we talked about um, thinking about being a founder. Founders, not followers, is what my notes said. And that
Mm,
goes along with just what you just said is, followers, regardless of followers, that kind of founder mentality um,
yeah.
is smart.
Let me see if I
Um,
can find that diagram for you.
okay, and then so John, you can stop the screen share for a moment. Let's check in with our room right now. Um, thank you again, guys, for being here. Folks, for being here. Really appreciate you. Wondering if anybody else has kind of comments, questions, concerns. That's what we're here for in the room. If you did have any kind of questions, you can bring them. And also people watching the replay, that's for you to know that the coming weeks, if you have a question, show up on a Sunday and bring your question. We'd love to talk about it. If you're dealing with something, or if you just had some thoughts about what we're talking about in John's book. So anybody else in the room have any kind of comments or questions? Don't be shy. Um, Usually it's a shy group. Go ahead. Yes, Chrissy, go ahead.
Um, where should we follow you? Like, what are your what socials? I think you mentioned Facebook, or I'm just looking on your Instagram, and I don't know if this is the right place to follow you.
So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
John,
no,
you're kind of like a bit low key, somewhat ominous sometimes.
yeah, I don't really do social media.
So it's
I
kind of
just find
cool
it
in the
super. I find it super distracting. That's
yeah.
why. Yeah, I do. I can send you the links. I can pop them in the chat if that's, or to like
Yeah.
the site, and then Twitter, and then I just find I'm going to use that as a way that it's easier for you to ask questions. And often what I've actually found, as an aside, we talked about this before in terms of actually communication, and I know I'm going a little bit off piece, but there's a reason for it. Is I said how I don't kind of take calls and meetings anymore. And that was like a boundary that I put in place because it disrupts my kind of flow that I'm in. Um, and what I've often found through various kind of investor meetings and stuff like that, and the amount of pictures, there's been a lot, is that if you can't put it down in writing, you quite often don't really know what your true ask is or what you're trying to get out of it, which I think is really, really interesting. So instead, we have a meeting to try and build emotional rapport rather than actually, and which actually distracts from what is the core operational thing that you want, which is and there is emotion in the relationship aspect of business. It's actually really, really important, and we touch on that later. There's a relational stack of business that is absolutely imperative with any deal. But I find it very, very interesting how sometimes that is more preference to begin with without actually knowing what the underlying value and ask is. So quite often, this is why I'm using X now, is that it helps hopefully allow you to kind of go through that process and that thought process of like, what is it that I really want to ask really succinctly, hopefully really direct questions, and hopefully therefore get better answers. So they're my links
Mhm.
there that I've just put in the chat for you. I've also found the operating plan if you'd like me to share that.
Great. Thank you so much. So everybody, please take note of the links in the chat. You're not allowed to record anything off of the video or to save the chat, but you can take note of them right now. And then John, I don't know if you would like these links to be available to the people watching the replay. We can grab these and put them in the comments if that's something that you want to do. Okay. Wow, we're really good on time. Anybody else have any follow-up questions about what we talked about?
I just loop back in on Chris's question previously
Yes.
on the reflection points. I'll just share my screen quickly. I think this is from like chapter, but it will hopefully give you a bit of an idea in terms of what I was thinking. So this is how I split it up. So yeah, Q1 is audit and structure. This is specifically for business. Q2 systems and scale. That could be your project management system or something. Do your current workflows work well for you, basically? Um, Q3 is your revenue and rights. And reason being, it just gives them a little bit more time to accrue. I find that if you do them at Q1, at least for me, and then going into the end of the financial year, it's just a lot. You're already doing an audit as it is. So revenue and rights is kind of checking the revenue, but also ensuring that all your metadata and your rights are all nicely aligned. They're registered with the right people. You've got your metadata in place and what have you. It's in the right database. And then Q4 is legacy and review. Is that core reflection point towards the end of the year? And the reason I put it there is because it just aligns with the end of the year and then going back into New Year's, right? It's a nice time to do it. So where do you eventually want to go? What is your goal? Is it that you're wanting to create a brand and community to then sell a clothing line off the back of it? Or is it that you want to go and tour? Or is it as simple as maybe that you're wanting to play at the local pub, for example, and then build a community and give back to your local community? It could be a variety of things, but what is it? And then the review aspect of where are you on that road, and what can you do to kind of improve it? So it's a mini little self-audit at Q4. Hopefully that
Wow.
helps.
That is very, very cool. And so we have that to look forward to in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that's chapter 6, that one. But moving forward, there's like diagrams for every single chapter
Cool.
that helps kind of explain each one. Yeah.
Wonderful. And may I must say, may I must say, anyway, I really love the colors that you chose. They're very calm and subtle.
Yeah.
I know they were probably very conscious decisions. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you
Uh,
for that.
Keep it pastel.
Well, so I just want to take the time, here in the US, it's gratefulness, but John, Clubhouse days, We started with gratefulness, the entire room, every single person, we'd go around the room and speak about what we're grateful for every single day, even if it
Mm.
took an hour and a half because there were 15 people there and everybody wanted to say all their stories and stuff. It was pandemic, so we could do it. And that's where we started. We had people like you, we had people like all the people in this room, all levels of all walks of life. And we just shared how grateful we were for things. And so, yeah, I would like to share how grateful I am for you, Jon, because this information is really invaluable. And the guidance that we're receiving here is like lifelong. And the fact that you're allowing us to record it and have it available for replay for everybody is amazing. And I'd like to just kind of take this opportunity to announce that we are going to be putting this on YouTube. We're going to make this available for the public.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, go
Thank you.
because you agreed to that, Jon. You said that that was totally fine, and we don't usually do that with private MPF stuff. So anybody, if you are watching the YouTube, just know we usually do closed sessions. But I'm happy to offer this because Jon, you're just so generous with your information. So yeah, we're gonna post this on YouTube on our Musicians Peer Support YouTube channel. So thank you, Jon, for that. So everybody in the rooms, anything else, Jon, before we start wrapping it up?
The only thing to say would be on the links provided as well to the website. If people find it easier to listen rather than to read, it will be on Apple Podcasts, and I'll also start uploading it on the website, so you can kind of just start listen through it as an audiobook instead. And then there'll be all the workbooks as well. I'm working through each one and just refining them a little bit more, and they'll all be there as well for free. It's only the book that has obviously a price tag on it, but aside from everything else, all the other resources are completely free. So you're more than welcome to dive into them, share them around, whatever you decide to do. Have fun with it.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's just a mic drop moment. Thank you for all that free stuff. This could look a lot different in a lot of different ways. But this is what this is, and I'm just very, very grateful for that. So I just want to say thank you. Also, we have a lot to look forward to next week, and the coming weeks.
Mm.
Also want to just say thank you all in the room, Chrissy, Deb, Keitha, Gretchen, EJ, for being here. That really means something to me. And also, we're going to be continuing these through the holidays, which I also appreciate as well. So your presence is appreciated, and everybody watching the replay, you are cordially invited. But also, yes, please support Jon by purchasing the book, which is now available. As you can see, this is not a ploy to like lure you into buying the book. This is really a sharing of information and knowledge, MPS style. And if you would like the book for yourself and you want to purchase the book, it's available for purchase. But you don't have to pay a single dollar in MPS fashion. You don't have to pay a single dollar to access this information.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, with that being said, we do have a Patreon, everybody. We also do take donations at MPS. That's just to keep the lights on and help our team and staff, not staff, but just team volunteers who are not paid, just kind of remain, and also help us support artists that maybe can't afford to be on the Patreon, but deserve to be there. And so we really appreciate anybody joining the Patreon, any donations. If you'd like to donate to Jon, buy his book. That's what I would recommend doing. Please purchase the book so that we can at least, I don't know, I think it's just as a gesture. I think it's really, really great. Most
Would you like a sneak
importantly,
peek of the next chapter?
ooh, yeah, I was going to say that for what we're, but most importantly is thank you for being here, for watching, for showing up, and for being part of the Musicians Peer Support community, and just for being you. Just like literally, your value is appreciated. Everybody who's here and everybody who's watching, and you, Jon, as well. What do we have to look forward to next week?
So the next week is chapter 3. We're moving out of the awareness and foundational themes and going into sustainability. And effectively, what that means is we're looking at something called the artist wealth formula. Within that, we'll define what does the word wealth actually mean. It's a term thrown around a lot of the time. You know, you hear gurus using it and whatever. Let's strip that all back and let's just get back to the real core of it. What does it mean? What does it actually mean to your legacy moving forward? And what does it mean to your identity as an artist, creator, and or whoever you identify as within the sector? Within that, we look at the three specific layers, and what I call it the capital stack specifically for artists. And there's three key layers that we'll be diving into that, as well as then looking at as well a bit of a deep dive into the income streams and the flow of that value throughout the industry, everything from master royalties to publishing, sync, and the likes, and even into merchandising and education as well, and how that then compounds over time. So a bit of a deep dive, but really, really looking at the meaning of what wealth actually means.
Wow. That's amazing. I am all for it. Debelle says, I absolutely want to purchase the book as a resource for more logical organization. Very grateful for your time and concern for
Thank you, Dave.
us. Gretchen says, much gratitude.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate you all. And John, yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm so looking forward to that. It sounds like we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty, as they say, next week. Let's see, Chrissy says, many thanks for your insights. And yes, thank you so much, everybody. The website, I will just say it for people also watching the replay that may not have access. Sorry, one moment. The website, the link to Ask John questions is going to be at x.com/Jon Altham. So x.com/JONALTHAM. The link to the resources is artistsblueprint.com/volume-1, ONE. That's Artists Blueprint, ARTISTBlueprint.com/VOLUME-ONE. And
amazing.
thank you. John's website is artistsblueprint.com, ARTISTSBLUEPRINT.com. Thank you so much for your patience, everybody. We do
Right.
have people that may not, they might need that spelt out for them. So just being sure that everybody has access to those. And thank you so
Thank you.
much. Anyone else? Okay. Anything else, John?
No, we're all good. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Musicianspeersupport.com is our website. Please join the newsletter, the mailing list. It's musicianspeersupport.com/join. Also, please consider joining our Patreon. Get a one-on-one session with me. You can email me at mps@musicianspeersupport.com. And the last thing is, we're turning 5 in January. So we'd love to see you at some of the
Nice.
festivities in January. So, and also Feedback Friday this week. Also, I'm sorry, this month. And also a lot of free events coming up and leading up to the anniversary. But also already booking in the new year some guest artists and guest sessions. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And John, thank you so much for what you do here. Really, really great week. And so excited for our discussion on wealth next week.
Thank you too. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye. Thank
Take care.
you.